You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
This episode of the NXT Report is not sponsored by WWE Ride Along. Even though they're not sponsoring us, if you ever wanted to hear Rich Swann say, "The beautiful Alicia Fox," and hold that last part as long as humanly possible, watch this week's episode. Now, back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Arya Whitner, and this is your NXT audio update for Wednesday, April 19th, 2017. Thank you all for listening. Welcome to an NXT that it seemed like they had 30 minutes of actual material and suddenly realized that they had a 58-minute show to fill and filled it up with a bunch of crap. And by crap, I mean crap. We had a plethora of commercial breaks just for the hell of it, including 2 in a relatively short main event. We had very random video packages for no reason other than to have them. And we had bullying featuring a WWE superstar who has 3 initials. And no, it's not that one. Anyway, we kicked things off this week with the reigning, undisputed NXT Heavyweight Champion of the World of Orlando, Bobby Roode. Shockingly, it only took him about 2.5 minutes to walk to the ring this week. Now, mind you, this is only for an interview segment, but imagine how long it would have taken him to get to the ring this year at WrestleMania. The show may still be going on if Roode had a match at WrestleMania this year. Anyway, speaking of WrestleMania, your champion announced that for the second year in a row, he has made WrestleMania weekend glorious, as he single-handedly sold out the Amway Center, and he gave 15,000 people the treat of a lifetime, and he allowed them to watch the biggest box office superstar in the world today. I'll be honest, I watched NXT TakeOver Orlando. I did an awesome audio recap, which I'm sure you can listen to here, somewhere. However, I missed the part where he had a special screening of The Fate of the Furious. But hey, what do I know? Roode said he does have a problem, though. He has a problem with the idiots paying tribute to Nakamura last week, especially the pathetic fans singing Nakamura's theme song. He said that you saw everyone on stage except for him, and the reason why is because he was not going to listen to the crap and the lies that came out of Nakamura's mouth. He stated that Nakamura did not leave NXT, but Roode beat him so badly that he tucked his tail between his legs and got the hell out of NXT. He said that none of these people deserve or belong to be in his NXT, and from now on they have 2 choices. Either jump on board and be a part of Bobby Roode's NXT, or they can hit the bricks like Nakamura. This brought out Jinder Mahal, who cashed in his title match right here against Bobby Roode. He then pinned Bobby Roode in 5 seconds, and Jinder Mahal became the NXT champion. No, that didn't happen. Instead, Hideo Itami came out. And I would have said, Hideo Itami is the most random person to come out and be a title contender, except SmackDown happened yesterday, and well, that's no longer the case. Anyway, Roode cockily confronted him, so Itami slapped the taste out of his mouth. Roode laughed and warned Hideo about messing with the champ, so Roode took off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. He shouted that this was his NXT, so Itami laid him out with the go to sleep. Kayla was backstage and introduced Tyler Bate and Jack Gallagher, who will go one-on-one next week for the UK Championship. These 2 extraordinary gentlemen put each other over and shook hands before their bout next week. After commercial, Bobby Roode was still laying in the ring. The fans are apparently stuck in about 2001 as they sang the song Smooth Criminal, but instead they asked Bobby if he was okay. Then we got yet another random WWE Performance Center cell phone video bullying segment as Heavy Machinery was randomly lifting weights when they noticed Andrade Cien Almas bullying Drew McIntyre at 1:15 p.m. I don't know why it was so special that it happened at 1:15 p.m. They made sure to note the time, though, when they filmed it. McIntyre had nothing to say to the little man, so Almas challenged him to a match next week. You might recall this is the second time now where people were randomly doing stuff at the WWE Performance Center when Andrade has bullied someone. Thankfully, in this era of WWE and their anti-bullying campaign, we have people standing up against bullies, and we have cell phone cameras there to film Andrade's bullying. No further comment at this time. This led to the bully himself, Andrade Cien Almas, going one-on-one with the returning Danny Burch. Speaking of bullies, Almas stopped bullying long enough to go into the ring and sports entertain here. And of course, as we know, Almas likes to play his silly games. And while he was doing it, Burch would have problems with the silly games and get in all of his offense. However, Burch couldn't resist playing the silly games himself, but every time he did, they'd come back to kick him in the butt, as it led to his downfall and it led to his loss, as Almas pinned him with the hammerlock DDT. A random Asuka video package, aired with every woman on the roster, including Daria Baronato, who allegedly has a new name, commenting on how dangerous she is. We then got a random video package for Tye Dillinger and Eric Young. And then after all that, we got a tag team match playa. The iconic duo of Peyton Royce and Billie Kay facing Liv Morgan and Aaliyah. As yes, the never-ending feud between the iconic duo and Liv Morgan continues. The feud between these three have been going on since June, with the heels holding a roughly a 5,000-2 advantage in the win column. In the interest of fairness, since these three have wrestled each other 5,002 times, they have gotten better at working against each other. This, of course, the same crowd from last week that when the referee counted 1, 2, and the wrestler kicked out. The crowd yelled, "Sweet!" Aaliyah almost forgot to kick out at one point after a Peyton Royce spin kick, and then shockingly picked up the win with a sunset flip of her own. Royce and Kay threw a hissy fit after the match, and it's never good to lose to the heavy favorites. Just ask the Boston Celtics. 2-0, baby. 2-0. Next week, Aleister Black is in action. Drew McIntyre versus ACA, and Tyler Bate versus Jack Gallagher for the WWE UK title. Which, by the way, after having the promo running down all these matches for next week, they then aired a commercial for the show next week. In the middle of the following match, the main event, the ending of the feud that's been going on since November, the steel cage match is here. Tye Dillinger versus Eric Young. For only the third time in history, a cage has been lowered for a bout here on NXT. First, Samoa Joe beat Finn Balor back at NXT TakeOver, the end. And then Shinsuke Nakamura beat Joe last December in Australia to retain the NXT title. This match was pretty much every WWE cage match you've ever seen, except the one with Brett versus Owen. This match was a lot of things. It was actually the return of blood in WWE, but it was not Bret Hart versus Owen Hart, which, if you recall, had no blood. Eric Young decided to pull a Bobby Roode and see how slowly he could walk to the ring. So long, in fact, that Dillinger reached out of the cage and dragged Young into it. Dillinger went for the tiebreaker early, but EY raked his eyes and threw him face first into the cold, hard, unforgiving steel cage. A lot of climbing went on. We had a lot of pulling off of the top rope. We had a lot of moves off the top rope. All of a sudden, Eric Young got super kicked into the cage, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, was wearing the crimson mask. There is bleeding on WWE television. They then fought near the top of the cage, and Young knocked Dillinger off. However, instead of climbing down, Young stood up and hit his giant elbow off the top of the cage. And no one will ever remember that because, yes, Dillinger then kicked out and did a giant cage move of his own in a second. Dillinger recovered and hit the tiebreaker and tried to crawl out the door, but Sanity ran down and wouldn't let him. So Cassius Ohno and Roderick Strong were tired of these shenanigans, so they ran down and got beat up themselves. Killian Dane tried to climb the cage and get in instead of going in through the door, but Dillinger knocked him down and tried climbing out the other side, but Alexander Wolf was there, and Dillinger knocked down Wolf. Killian Dane got in the cage at this point and tried to drag Young out of it. Dillinger, seeing this, stood up and hit a crossbody off of the top of the cage onto Sanity. And then as Alexander Wolf tried to stop him, Dillinger climbed out the door. And in Dillinger's last night in NXT, after all this time, he finally wins a big, important match. And to celebrate, he gets carried out on everyone's shoulders as the fans chant, "Thank you, Tye. Thank you, Tye. Thank you, Tye." And that will do it for not only the Tye Dillinger era, but this week's episode of NXT. Thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you again in 7 days.
You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.